I am Steve, I'm one of the pastors here, and you get to listen to me for the next bit. So, thank you. Grateful for the enthusiasm. Let's hope it lasts. We've been working through a series on the attributes of God. We've got an exciting new series coming up. And then there's this one. So today it's me. I want to talk to you about something we often think that we know all about. But I found that in preparing it's been a bit tricky when many people consider themselves an authority on this particular subject. They assume they know all sorts of things about it, particularly because I'm not sure I am. It's something I feel I'm still learning and need to learn so much about. I don't know if you ever noticed people who think they're quite an authority, assuming certain levels of competence and expertise. Many people think they know exactly what the government and politicians should be doing, and how things should be run and organised, how they'll be paid for, and so on. So many people are sure they know exactly how football and cricketing teams should play and how they should be coached and who should be playing and what should happen in all of that. And sometimes I've noticed we even think we know more about this subject than God, which seems quite presumptuous. Not everybody believes in God, but if they do, even if they're a bit skeptical that God exists, these days they're rock solid certain if God exists, he's a God of love, they tell themselves. And they assume they know exactly what his love should do. If God's a God of love, he'd definitely do this. He wouldn't do that. You see, today I'm talking about love. I'm talking about true love and how important that is for us. True love is what Jesus has for his bride. His bride is the church. That's how Jesus describes the church, because he loves her truly and deeply in an extraordinary and committed way. And whatever we think we know about love, whatever we think we have experienced or would like to experience about true love, the Bible tells us we will only know true love by knowing Jesus. And so in a letter at the end of the New Testament, 1 John chapter 3, there are some verses that say this: by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. This is telling us that the way we know true love is by Jesus, his act, incredible act of love, laying down his life for us. And from there, we also know love not just by pithy things we've seen on Pinterest, by words or opinions of it, but it says in deed and truth. That's things that we do and ways that we believe about them with our hearts open to other people's need. How do you know love? By making sure you've felt it, or by acting in Jesus' love, recognizing what he's done. You see, this true love is the hallmark of Jesus' following. He told us this would be the way that all people will know that you're my disciples. Not that you have to do this. It's not something we have to do. It's simply the clearest and most obvious and most important distinguishing mark of who we are together. How will people know if you're a Jesus follower? Because you sit at home and think about him an awful lot. You read books, you've watched a lot of things on YouTube about Jesus. Not too many clues at that point. Jesus is saying, by the way that you interact together. That's the big telltale. It's the big clue of who it is. And so this is, I believe, an important word. But I believe today the reason I wanted to bring this in-between series is because I think there's some urgency about it. Some real urgency for us. Because it strikes me, these are days of relational angst. And I should probably explain what I mean by that. We are continuing to live through some pretty crisis-ridden days, I would say. I hope that's a fair comment. There have been and will be many practical changes, and each of those has emotional consequences that we need to work through and live through. In our lives, there's a disconnection and a kind of dislocation, which are more than just functional or, well, functional and quite emotional. Yep, they are those things, but they're more than that too. If we think life has only impacted us practically and emotionally, that'll determine the limits of how we respond to life. What are we going to do in the middle of all of this? We'll recut our cloth. We'll make practical and logistical changes to our lives so that we can overcome the different practical challenges of daily life, won't we? We'll say, I'm not getting that busy again. Not like I was before all of this. If we think that, it's the most important thing is, and really it's been a huge emotional challenge, we'll nurture our emotional well-being more carefully and then some because, well, there's another crisis coming and who knows, maybe another one after that. It's important that we are responsible in our lives, in the practical and emotional decisions we need to make. I'm not dismissing those things, I'm certainly not belittling them. But as a pastor, what I'm hearing most within the church is there's a disruption to our connectedness. Something is deeply challenging our relationships together. People are saying to me, I don't know quite how I connect to church. I'm not sure if I turn up on a Sunday, but I don't know quite whether people know I'm there or what it's like there. People are wrestling with those sorts of things. Jesus never wanted it to be just you and him, all cozy all the time. The thing is, following Jesus is about doing that with other people. Even if at times, maybe like this one, that seems a little bit at odds with itself. When crowds weren't following Jesus and filling the house he was in, his true love was calling people down from trees or asking them if he could meet their husbands. He was going into their homes himself and getting invited to their parties. It was always, following Jesus was always lead us towards other people. That's vitally important. We're made in God's image. We are relational beings. Our relationship are God's way of his truth and grace in our lives. They're not just a sort of the icing on the cake of life. Life is knowing and being known. It's how we know the truth, live in the truth, grow in it. It's how we change. And when our relationships are damaged, if they're disrupted or destroyed, we will experience that loss of truth and grace. We will feel the uncomfortableness of it, the absence of that. I felt that. It's certainly how it's been for me. It's been a hard and a painful time. I'd like it to stop. But as one crisis seems to roll into another, I'm not quite sure where it is. I've seen things I didn't want to see about the friend that I am and about some of the friendships that I have. Maybe including some friendships I mistakenly thought I had. I'm not blaming anyone, but I reckon that's worth saying out loud in public because I want to take responsibility for my own failings. Jesus taught us relationally to think about the plank in our own eye, to consider ourselves first before we thought about others' faults and failings. And I believe too that the church should be a place where we can recognize together when things ain't right. The Bible calls that lament. There's a place where we get to voice it together, to hear it together, not to drag each other down, but because that's the most healthy thing to do. Bottling it up, taking it out on someone else or somewhere else, shuffling off with it somewhere else, are way less healthy things to do. Staying together, sharing together, because in that way we can keep looking to Jesus for all that we should be in the light of things that, wow, that was a bit rubbish, wasn't it? Let's look to Jesus and see what could be better in him. Queen Elizabeth, as we've thought of things she said this week, I heard it said again, how she said, grief is the price we pay for love. And when we share our grief about what life is or isn't, or what it has or hasn't been, we're in a better place to help each other pay the price for love. We're in a better place for that. So the urgent thing for us is how we recognize what really gets lost in our relationships when we're simply reacting and responding to crises, one after another. But I think this is urgent for a second reason, and something that's been observed by others for a while now. Technology is changing the ways we relate together. It doesn't matter however many gadgets you happen to have got, or what you do or don't do in them. As a general thing, it's changing who we are as a society and how we relate together. We're becoming less intentional, less humble, and less authentic in the things that we choose to say about ourselves and share with each other. There's less listening. There's quite a lot of criticizing, isn't there? There's less listening. There's less understanding and empathy. There's less forgiveness. It seems we're more likely to just take the bits we want from our friendships and leave the rest. It's a kind of consumer approach to relationships. That's been a trend for a little while, as long as our relationships have been working here and there and online and social media and so on. But what happened in a pandemic was that technology was the only means really for almost all of our relationships, and the same in the church. So it's an urgent thing, I believe, for us to avoid allowing that trend towards consuming church. So how can we reorient ourselves in Jesus' true love? Maybe it's hard. It's hard to think about it. I found it hard to think how to talk about it because as soon as we talk about love, so many other cliches and ideas are associated with that. All in our heads of what it is and what we know of it. So many songs have been written and verses penned. But in thinking what I'd say, I wanted to look again at Romans chapter 12. And I'm going to read a section to you, starting from verse 9. You may want to look at that if you've got a Bible or a gadget. You may want to open that up and find Romans 12, because I'm going to refer to it for a few minutes. It might be helpful to you to have it in front of you. And it says this: let love be genuine. You could say, let love be true. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. The whole passage, it goes on from there, and it expands the idea of letting love be true. But verses 9 through to 16 seem to focus much more in true love in the church. And seeing as you're in church today, I'm counting you in that. I'm wanting to talk to you about that. After this, there's some more on true love going beyond the church. But let's just look at that. I want to list out maybe some of the ways that the Bible speaks to us about true love. Maybe as I'm thinking about those, you might think about your own ideas. Well, is that my idea of true love? Is that what I expect it to be, to know? What do I feel in those things? What do I do in respect of those things? In verse 9, the first thing it strikes me, it says, is that true love does stuff. True love does stuff. It's more than feeling. In fact, I'm not quite sure where feelings get a look in this description of true love in the church, or how much feelings rule what happens. Where it begins is true love acts. That's the first way we see it and know it. Is that your first measure of true love? True love has a direction of travel. It's away from some things and towards others. Where do our ideas of true love begin? Are they with what you feel or what you can do? Well, I don't feel like doing it, so I'm not going to. Would that start? By this measure, whether or not you feel like it doesn't seem to be a ruling factor. Where is true love leading us? What does it lead us away from? How might someone see true love in us as a church? That's an important question. Verse 10, I'm not going to dwell on any of this for too long. We'll work through it. True love is devoted to others. It defers to others. It's ready to recognize and to recommend. In fact, that seems to be one of its favorite things. There's comparison in this, but it's the opposite from the sort that someone described as the thief of joy. Elsewhere, people have said comparison's the thief of joy. But in here, it's saying true love compares and says, no way, you're better than me at that. That's brilliant, I love that. It's what it's saying, completely different. Who are we trying to make good? Who are we trying to make look good in what we do, what we say, what we share, what we post online? True love is devoted to others. True love is committed to Jesus, verse 11. It is consistently, consciously, it is faithfully serving Jesus. It doesn't want to appear reluctant. It's concerned that this is something that matters, and this is how I want to be seen and known. We've already talked about the Queen as a great example of that, wanting to be seen and known in her commitment to Jesus. True love is patient in tribulation, we find in verse 12. It's a kind of patience that's not merely hanging about, well, if I keep going, I'll get through this. It's saying, I'm going to be patient even in this. I'm going to press through because I'm going to go on for what I want. But this kind of true love is Patient when life is definitely not what I want, not what I wanted. I don't know when it's going to change, but there's a patience here. I think verse 12 gives us an important handle on that, because that patient lives between hope celebrated and prayer maintained. When I find myself impatient in things, it's usually because I just want to get out of them. I want something else, and if God's got a love, he should have got me there by now. True love says, I've got a hope in God. He knows what he's doing. I'm going to keep talking to him. And between those two places, I'm good with that. What a patience there is in that kind of love. When I might prefer to say to myself, I don't like this. This true love just celebrates hope. It continues in prayer. True love in verse 13 is partnering with other people's needs. Hold on. Who's going to show me a bit of love around here? True love is saying, how can I recognize someone else's needs? It's not just saying, well, how can I recognize people? That's great. Yep. Thanks. We're in this together. Let me know if you need anything. That's loving someone in order to make a positive difference to them. Instead of maybe loving someone that we might hope or expect would make a difference to me. Why would I go to King's Church? They haven't helped me at all. No one seems to recognize me there. No one gives me attention there. True love isn't saying any of those sorts of things. It's saying, right, this is a place I get to make a difference to somebody else. This is a place where I can love them or try and love them even a tiny bit how God does. Verse 14, true love is blessing. It's not cursing opponents. Now, some people who've commentated this and reflected on it think, that can't be the church, right? Because surely persecution doesn't happen within the church. Well, I may not know as much as them, but I've got a sneaky feeling it does sometimes. Not everybody is as nice to everybody as they could be in the church. I'm afraid sometimes people do oppose other people, I'm sorry to say. I've seen it and I don't like it. It stinks. True love is loving people when they're not trying one little bit to be lovely. And I'm glad if that understanding is right, that, do you know what? The Bible recognizes sometimes it can be a bit clunky. But in that, I'm going to keep on in true love. That's not a deal breaker for true love. True love says, I'm here in that. Even when it involves people who should know better, I still want to find a way to work with that. Do I want to bless? As I read that, I say to myself, do I want to bless as much as true love wants to? In those kind of ways. It's deeply provocative. I'm challenged deeply in that. There's something in me that would prefer to treat people how they deserve. It's not my best bit. True love is always thinking about a better way, blessing someone, whether or not they seem to deserve it. And verse 15, true love is connecting emotionally. It's not analysing or explaining. It's not judging or dismissing. It's not telling them they're a bit over the top. I know you're excited about Jesus, but could you tone it down a little bit? Or telling them, look, it is sad. I'm sorry for your loss, but that was some time ago. And, they had a good innings, didn't they? It's connecting with their mourning and their rejoicing. How many times we prefer to fix someone or adjust them slightly in terms of who they are and where they're at emotionally, with or without ever really connecting with them, knowing their joy. You're pretty excited about that. That must mean a lot to you. Wow. That's been tough for you. I can hear that's been a difficult season. Do I want to connect with a church like this? Is that something that we want to hold together? This is what the Bible is telling us true love is doing. True love longs for a common mindset, it says in verse 16. pride will stop you doing this. We would rather be right sometimes. Anybody recognise they ever sort of rerun conversations that they didn't feel they were quite right enough in? You rerun the conversation, and if you are a conversation rerunner, I've done it, that's how I know. If you're a conversation rerunner, you're always more right in the rerun, aren't you? You rerun the conversation, and afterwards, the point absolutely slam dunks. You tell them, and they're like, oh, you're right, oh no, why didn't I think of it like that? Confession, I've never rerun a conversation where I rerun the conversation and the person says to me what they said and I can't believe it. I'm so sorry, you're completely right. I rerun it like that because I have to prove I'm right. And if I didn't think they listened to it enough, I'll run it in my head till I think they've listened to it a bit better. Be of the same mind. Some translations say, live in harmony. That's finding the note that suits someone else's note best. If you're not very musical, it's saying, hey, that's their note. What note could I play? They're like, nah, whatever it goes. What could I do that sits alongside that? I could just tuck in underneath with this note, and together they're going to sound amazing. Live in harmony with each other. You know, and that's just not the right note, but that means it's got to be the right volume. Like their notes, and mine's like, some of us prefer to do that, wouldn't we? Notice me. My note's better than theirs anyway. They should be harmonizing with me. True love is saying, how can we be together in who we are? And musicians will tell you every note has a dynamic too. There's a way it starts. There's a way it grows. Does it get louder as it goes? Does it like, wah? Does it fade? If you're going to harmonize, you've got to follow every aspect of their note in the note that your life makes. The right volume to fit them in every way. You've got to hear their note, of course, before you can harmonize with it. Wow. We come to church to find and to live out true love. I don't know what your experience of that has been, Matt. When we joined this church, there was no one else in our stage of life or in our circumstances. I remember the first Sunday joining a church meeting. It was in a hired school hall. There was a lovely old lady on this side of us and a busy young family on that side. And we were neither of those. In fact, as I looked around the room, I'm not sure there was anybody in our season or chapter of life. And we've been here long enough to experience most human imperfections, shall we say. That was several years ago. And as much, I've knew great friendship with both of the people we sat with on that day. But if I'm honest, at times they both really hurt me too. They said things that seemed clumsy or untimely. Probably not as much as I did. But we did. We tried to work out friendship and relationship together. Jesus looks at the church and sees her as ravishing. He's filled with true love for the church. It's absolutely true love for him. If I only see the church's faults and failures, the imperfections, the disappointments, how am I really following him? What does that make for in any true love relationship? Come on, experts. You know. It doesn't work like that. Well, you don't have a relationship listing someone's faults and failures. That's always going to snipe and undermine it. What if I looked at the church like Jesus does? What if we all did? As the object of his affection, seeing her gloriously through the cross. I wonder if you ever thought you knew more about love than God. When we're intentional and humble before God, we are more likely to be the same before others too. When Jesus chose true love, he became Emmanuel, living with us and like us. Today, in talking about true love, I want to say, what happens when we choose it? How will we choose to know the church? And I want to say as well, it's not that you ought to. This is just kind of what it's like. If you feel like you've got to love people some more, maybe I can suggest two things as we try and finish this. One, I think as we look at the Bible, we should be reminded to refocus on knowing Jesus' true love, first of all. It's not just a feeling. I don't think anywhere the Bible says, because Jesus loves you, you should feel like that. Focusing on Jesus' true love is recognizing what his true love did, just like the Romans passage reminded us. How's his true love going to act for us? So don't feel like you've got to get yourself, okay, I'm going to know that Jesus really loves me. I'm going to sit at home more often and sit down quiet. I'm going to play that song and eventually I might feel it. Jesus wants to remind us of what his true love has done, the facts of the cross, what it cost him, how keen he was for that. And secondly, I think, try doing something for someone else with your heart open to Jesus. Don't do it to prove that they won't want you to do it. That's not an open heart. Don't do it to do your bit because you ought to. That's not open either. That's just, do minimum and get out of here. Do your heart something open to Jesus. I think that'll make your heart a great place for God's love to live and to grow. You'll be better placed to know his true love rather than hoping to find it in another imperfect person. You may do something for somebody and they'll be utterly ungrateful. If you've done it to know true love from then, you're stuffed, aren't you? But we're looking for true love in an imperfect person that way. We're doing this open to who God is and what he would do. So I think the best response we can make is a commitment towards intentional and humble and authentic relationships. I'm going to get the band to come up. Not because that might be a bit nicer. I think it's because they matter for truth and grace. True love looks to grow relationships so they will be deeper and stronger. Today, I want us to think, where will we do that? Where will we do that? How does that land? At some point, we've done a number of weeks speaking about who God is. And you might have noticed we never did a God is love. Maybe you were waiting for that one. Well, in some senses, this is that one. This is the God is love talk at the end of the God is series. Well, how does anybody know that? How will they know it? Good question. How will they know it in your life and in who we are together? Where will we begin to do that? We believe life groups and the way we connect together relationally are a key part of that. They're a key place for beginning and those relationships. You won't necessarily find all your best pals in a life group, but it is a place to put yourself out there in a way that is intentional and humble and look to be authentic and to help others as they try and do that. If you're not yet in one, please consider where your life might connect with others. Could it be in one of our life groups. If you're already in a life group, please let me encourage you to be, this term, you're going again. How are we going to be more honest and real with each other? How are we going to prefer each other? How are we going to connect emotionally together? You're not there to fix each other. You're there for true love. You're there to rejoice together and to mourn together, to prefer each other, to celebrate each other, to respond to each other's needs in all those ways that Romans 12 reminds us to do it. Maybe that's not an option for you. Maybe the best thing you could do is get here for 10 o'clock for a cuppa next Sunday and put yourself out there and not think, oh, no one talks to me. Why am I going to turn up then? I'd rather scrape in at 10:28. It's a lot easier. What about being there and finding someone else who you suspect might have already thought all of that more than you? Looking to do those things. Our relationships are so key. We must be intentional about them. This isn't just a nice thing about church that makes it a sort of lovely, happy place. Our relationships are a means of truth and grace. They so quickly come under fire because maybe someone else knows more than us how vital they are, how life-affirming they are, how life-giving, how they count for something in life and in eternity. And I want us to be a church where we readily remember that, we remind each other of that, and we keep living like that's what love is. And that's how God wants us to live in love together. So I want us to focus on Jesus just right now. We're going to worship him together, celebrate his love, and respond to him.